Dr. Elena Vasquez had learned 3 fundamental rules of xenophysiology therapy during her 15 years treating alien patients. Never assume that what looks like an injury actually is one. Never touch anything that glows without checking the cultural implications first. And never, ever ignore the warning signs when your equipment starts beeping in patterns you don't recognize. Unfortunately, the Zephyrian woman lying on her treatment table was making it impossible to follow any of these rules. The bioarmor integration appears severely compromised, Elena murmured, studying the readings on her diagnostic scanner while trying not to stare at the way Kira Velthane's organic armor plating flickered with erratic patterns of blue and silver light. When did you first notice the neural disruption symptoms? Approximately 6 hours after the reactor accident on the transport vessel Stellar Wind, Kira replied, her voice carrying harmonics that Elena's translation software was struggling to interpret. The luminal nerve pathway seemed to have been severed by radiation exposure. Elena had treated reactor exposure cases before, but never on a species whose nervous system was partially integrated with living technology. Zephyrian bioarmor wasn't just protective gear. It was a symbiotic organism that interfaced directly with their neural networks, providing everything from environmental monitoring to long-distance communication capabilities. When the armor malfunctioned, it could leave a Zephyrian effectively cut off from their own technology and, in severe cases, their own sensory systems. I'm going to need to perform manual nerve pathway mapping, Elena said, pulling up the Zephyrian anatomical charts on her secondary display. Fair warning, this might feel strange. Human pressure point techniques don't always translate well to alien physiology. I understand the risks, Dr. Vasquez, Kira said, though her bioarmor's light patterns suggested she was more nervous than she was admitting. Your reputation for treating interspecies neural trauma is why I requested assignment to this medical station. Elena began with gentle pressure along what her charts indicated were the primary nerve clusters in Kira's legs, areas where the bioarmor interface nodes were most heavily concentrated. The moment her fingers made contact, Kira's armor erupted in patterns of light that were definitely not random malfunction displays. That's unusual, Elena said, pausing to check her readings. Your armor is responding to the therapy, but the patterns are more complex than I'd expect from simple neural stimulation. The patterns are significant, Kira said carefully, her voice carrying new harmonics that Elena's software labeled as ceremonial formality with undertones of surprise. Significant how? In ways that may have diplomatic implications. Elena's scanner chose that moment to start beeping frantically, displaying readouts that showed Kira's bioarmor was not only responding to the therapy, but actively transmitting the response patterns across what appeared to be a galaxy-wide communication network. Kira, Elena said slowly, please tell me your armor isn't broadcasting my medical treatment to your entire species. Not exactly, Kira replied, and her armor's patterns shifted to what looked distinctly like embarrassment. It's broadcasting your neural pressure sequences to the Zephyrian diplomatic corps as formal treaty recognition protocols. I'm sorry, what? Your touch patterns, when applied to luminal nerve clusters during a healing context, constitute a legally binding witness attestation according to our ancient diplomatic codes. Elena stared at her patient, whose bioarmor was now cycling through patterns that her database was identifying as everything from formal recognition ceremonies to interspecies bonding rituals. Are you telling me that giving you a leg massage has somehow made me an official participant in Zephyrian politics? Essentially, yes. Kira's armor flickered with what looked like apologetic amusement. Though technically, what you've done is much more significant than political participation. How much more significant? You've become a lawful witness with access to classified intelligence that could prevent or start the next interstellar war, depending on how you choose to use it. Elena looked at her scanner, which was showing energy signatures that suggested Kira's bioarmor, had just finished downloading several terabytes of encrypted data directly from distant Zephyrian databases. Please tell me you're exaggerating about the war part. I'm afraid not, Kira said, sitting up slowly as her armor continued its light display. Though I should probably mention that my reactor accident wasn't actually an accident. Come again. I was deliberately exposed to neural-disrupting radiation as part of a plan to smuggle critical intelligence past security checkpoints. The data is hidden in my bioarmor's memory systems, but it can only be accessed and authenticated by someone with lawful witness status. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. What kind of intelligence? The kind that exposes a conspiracy to manipulate multiple species into a war that would kill millions while making certain individuals extremely wealthy. Kira's armor patterns shifted to something that looked like urgent determination, the kind that can only be transmitted if you're willing to complete the witness bonding process. And if I refuse, then the data remains locked. I probably die from the neural damage, and the conspirators succeed in starting their profitable war. Elena looked at her diagnostic equipment, which was cheerfully informing her that Kira's condition was actually improving rapidly under the pressure point therapy. So let me get this straight. I accidentally became a Zephyrian diplomatic witness by giving you physical therapy, and now I have to choose between saving your life and potentially preventing an interstellar war, or maintaining my professional objectivity and watching millions of people die. That's a reasonably accurate summary, yes. And the witness bonding process would permanently integrate you with Zephyrian diplomatic protocols, granting you access to our governmental systems, but effectively exiling you from normal human society. Elena continued the massage therapy, watching as Kira's bioarmor responded with increasingly complex patterns that her scanner indicated were having measurable positive effects on the damaged neural pathways. You know, she said finally, when I went to medical school, they never mentioned that physical therapy might involve choosing the fate of galactic civilization. Is that a complaint or an observation? That's me wondering if my malpractice insurance covers accidentally becoming an alien diplomat. As Elena continued the neural pathway therapy, Kira's bioarmor began displaying patterns that her medical database was frantically trying to categorize. The organic plating along Kira's legs pulsed with intricate geometries that seemed to tell a story, each sequence more complex than the last. The patterns are beautiful, Elena said, maintaining steady pressure on the nerve clusters while trying to understand what she was witnessing. But I'm getting readings that suggest they're not just random displays. They're not random at all, Kira confirmed, her voice carrying new harmonics that Elena's translator was labeling as historical significance mixed with personal urgency. Each pattern represents a piece of encrypted intelligence that's been dormant in my bioarmor's memory core since the radiation exposure activated the storage protocols. Storage protocols. Zephyrian bioarmor can function as a biological data storage system in extreme circumstances. The radiation exposure didn't just damage my nerves, it triggered emergency encryption protocols that hid classified intelligence in my armor's living memory. Elena paused in her therapy to study the readouts more carefully. The patterns weren't just beautiful, they were mathematically precise, suggesting a level of information density that was staggering. How much data are we talking about? Financial records, communication intercepts, and strategic planning documents spanning 7 different species and 43 different worlds, Kira said. Enough evidence to prove that a consortium of war profiteers has been manipulating border conflicts and sabotaging peace negotiations for the past decade. And this intelligence can only be accessed through the witness bonding process. The encryption is keyed to neural patterns that can only be generated through intimate physical contact between two beings during a formal witness ceremony. Your pressure point therapy has already begun the process. My armor is responding to your touch by decrypting the first layers of data. Alina looked at her scanner, which was showing energy patterns that seemed to be emanating not just from Kira's bioarmor, but from her own nervous system. Is it just me, or am I starting to feel some kind of connection to your armor's responses? That's the beginning of the neural integration, Kira said, her armor patterns shifting to what looked like cautious hope. The witness bonding creates a shared nervous system interface that allows both participants to access encrypted data while maintaining independent consciousness. How permanent is this integration? Completely permanent. Once the bonding is complete, you'll have permanent access to Zephyrian diplomatic networks and biotechnology, but you'll also be bound by our laws and cultural obligations. Alina's personal communicator chose that moment to start beeping with an incoming message from the medical station's administrative office. The text was brief and somewhat ominous. Dr. Vasquez, please report immediately regarding irregularities in your current patient treatment protocols. That's probably not good, Alina said, showing Kira the message. It's definitely not good, Kira agreed, her armor patterns shifting to what looked like alarm mixed with determination. The conspiracy includes operatives monitoring medical facilities for signs of intelligence breaches. If they've detected the data transmission patterns, they'll move to eliminate both of us. How long do we have? The Dead Man Protocol gives us 72 hours from the initial data activation. If the intelligence isn't properly authenticated and transmitted by then, automated systems will assume I've been captured or killed, and will trigger military responses that will escalate existing tensions into full-scale war. Alina continued the therapy while processing this information, noting that Kira's condition was improving dramatically as her bioarmor continued its complex light displays. So we have 3 days to complete a bonding process that will permanently change my life, authenticate intelligence that could prevent a war, and avoid being killed by people who profit from interstellar conflicts. That's an accurate assessment of our situation, yes. And if we succeed, we expose the conspiracy, prevent the war, and establish new protocols for interspecies intelligence sharing that could benefit the entire galaxy. Alina's scanner was showing increasingly complex readings, as her continued therapy seemed to be creating some kind of feedback loop between her nervous system and Kira's bioarmor. She was beginning to experience sensations that weren't her own, glimpses of memories, emotional responses that felt alien yet somehow familiar. Kira, she said carefully, I'm starting to experience what I think might be your memories. Is that normal? It's the beginning of the deeper neural integration, Kira confirmed. As the bonding progresses, we'll share more than just access to encrypted data. You'll gain insight into Zephyrian culture and perspective, while I'll understand human emotional and sensory patterns. What does the complete bonding process involve? A public ceremony where we perform synchronized neural calibration, while your pressure point therapy techniques are integrated with my bioarmor's data transmission protocols. The process creates a permanent biotechnological bridge between our nervous systems. Alina's communicator beeped again, this time with a message that was considerably more urgent. Dr. Vasquez, security personnel are en route to your treatment bay. Please prepare for immediate consultation. Decision time, Kira said quietly, her armor patterns shifting to something that looked like resigned courage. Complete the bonding and save millions of lives while sacrificing your human identity, or maintain your independence and watch the galaxy descend into profitable chaos. Alina looked at her patient, whose bioarmor was now displaying patterns that seemed to tell the story of entire civilizations, then at her scanner, which was showing that her own neural patterns were becoming increasingly synchronized with Kira's responses. You know what? She said, increasing the intensity of her pressure point therapy and watching as Kira's armor exploded in new patterns of light. I became a doctor to heal people, not to watch them suffer for political profit. If completing this bonding can prevent a war, then I guess I'm about to become the galaxy's most unusual diplomat. Alina, Kira said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep gratitude mixed with profound relief. I think you're about to become something much more important than a diplomat. What's that? The first human to prove that healing and diplomacy are the same thing. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor suggested that their philosophical discussion was about to become considerably more practical and dangerous. The security team that entered Alina's treatment bay was definitely not standard medical station personnel. They moved with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military training, and their equipment included devices that Alina's medical scanner was identifying as unknown energy weapons with probable lethal capability. Dr. Vasquez, said the team leader, whose uniform bore no identifying marks but whose posture screamed military authority, please step away from the patient and prepare for escort to a secure debriefing facility. I'm in the middle of treating a patient with severe neural trauma, Alina replied, not moving from her position beside Kira's treatment table. Medical ethics require that I complete the therapy session. The patient's condition is no longer your concern, the leader said, while his team members took positions that effectively surrounded both Alina and Kira. We have specialized personnel who can handle alien physiology. Kira's bioarmor patterns shifted to what Alina was learning to recognize as barely controlled fear mixed with desperate determination. Through their growing neural connection, Alina could feel Kira's awareness that these weren't medical personnel. They were elimination specialists whose job was to ensure that the encrypted intelligence never reached its destination. How long until the dead man protocol activates? Alina asked quietly, continuing her pressure point therapy despite the weapons trained on them. 57 hours, Kira replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. But if they take us into custody, the authentication process becomes impossible. Dr. Vasquez, the team leader said, his tone becoming more insistent, this is your final warning. Step away from the alien and accompany us for debriefing. Alina looked at her scanner, which was showing that the neural integration between her and Kira was accelerating under the stress of the situation. She was beginning to experience not just Kira's memories, but her understanding of Zephyrian technology, culture, and the devastating consequences of allowing the conspiracy to succeed. I have a better idea, Alina said, placing both hands on the nerve clusters that seemed to be most responsive to her touch. Why don't you explain why you're so interested in preventing me from treating a patient with radiation-induced neural damage? Kira's bioarmor erupted in patterns that Alina now understood were not just data displays but active communication protocols. Through their shared neural interface, she felt Kira activating emergency transmission systems that would broadcast their situation to Zephyrian diplomatic networks. The patient is transmitting classified intelligence without authorization, the team leader said, raising his weapon. Your continued interaction with the subject constitutes a breach of interstellar security protocols. Whose security protocols? Alina asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Because according to my patient files, Kira Velthane is a diplomatic courier who was injured in an accident. Since when do medical personnel require security clearance to treat injured diplomats? Since the diplomats in question are carrying intelligence that threatens ongoing strategic operations, the leader replied, and his tone suggested that the conversation was over. That's when Alina made a decision that would have seemed insane to her 48 hours earlier, but now felt like the only rational response to an impossible situation. Instead of stepping away from Kira, she intensified her pressure point therapy, placing her hands on nerve clusters that she instinctively knew would accelerate the bonding process. Kira, she said, feeling the neural integration deepening as both their nervous systems synchronized. I think it's time for that public ceremony you mentioned. Elena, the bonding process requires specific conditions and formal protocols, Kira replied, though her bioarmor was responding to Elena's touch with patterns that suggested the ceremony was already beginning. We can't just improvise interspecies diplomatic procedures. Watch me, Elena said, as she felt her own nervous system beginning to interface directly with Kira's bioarmor systems. I'm a doctor, not a diplomat, but I know healing when I feel it. The security team leader made a tactical error by assuming that two beings lying on a medical treatment table couldn't pose a significant threat. He failed to account for the fact that Zephyrian bioarmor, when properly activated, could interface with any technological system in its vicinity, including the medical station's environmental controls, communication networks, and defensive systems. When Elena's hands made full neural contact with Kira's primary interface nodes, the medical bay suddenly became the center of a galaxy-wide communication event. Kira's bioarmor blazed with light patterns that were being transmitted in real time to diplomatic facilities throughout Zephyrian space, while Elena's neural patterns were being recorded and broadcast as evidence of the first successful human-Zephyrian witness bonding in recorded history. What's happening? The team leader demanded, as his equipment started malfunctioning in response to the electromagnetic pulses generated by the bonding process. What's happening? Elena said, her voice now carrying harmonics that no human throat should have been able to produce. Is that we're authenticating intelligence that proves you and your employers have been manipulating interstellar conflicts for profit? Through their shared neural interface, Elena and Kira accessed the encrypted data simultaneously, experiencing not just the financial records and communication intercepts, but the full emotional impact of the conspiracy's consequences. They felt the desperation of refugees denied aid that had been paid for but diverted, the grief of families separated by conflicts that had been artificially prolonged, and the hope of peace negotiators whose work had been systematically sabotaged. The authentication is complete, Kira announced, her bioarmor now displaying patterns that Elena understood represented the formal transmission of evidence to judicial authorities throughout the galaxy. The intelligence has been verified and distributed. And the Dead Man Protocol, Elena asked, deactivated, the evidence has reached its destination. The security team leader was speaking rapidly into his communication device, reporting what was clearly a mission failure to superiors who were not pleased with the development. Around them, the medical bay systems were returning to normal operation, but Elena realized that nothing about her life would ever be normal again. So, she said, still maintaining neural contact with Kira, despite the fact that the immediate crisis had passed, how permanent is this bonding exactly? Completely permanent, Kira replied, her bioarmor patterns shifting to what looked like affection mixed with gratitude. You're now the first human with direct access to Zephyrian diplomatic networks and biotechnology. Congratulations, Dr. Vasquez. You're officially the galaxy's most unusual ambassador. And the conspiracy, exposed and under investigation by multiple species' judicial systems. The war they were trying to start has been prevented, and the refugees they were exploiting will finally receive the aid that was always meant for them. Elena felt the neural integration stabilizing, creating a permanent bridge between her consciousness and Kira's bioarmor systems. It was strange and alien and completely irreversible, but it also felt like coming home in a way she couldn't have imagined. You know, she said, as the security team retreated under orders from superiors who clearly wanted to distance themselves from a failed operation. When I went to medical school, they never mentioned that physical therapy might involve preventing interstellar wars. Do you regret it? Elena considered the question while feeling the flow of information between her human perspective and Kira's Zephyrian understanding. Ask me again in a few years, but I don't think so. Healing people was always the point. I just never realized the scale of healing that might be possible. The formal calibration ceremony took place 3 days later in the medical station's main conference center, which had been hastily converted into a space that could accommodate both human medical protocols and Zephyrian diplomatic requirements. Alina had spent the intervening time learning to navigate her new neural connection with Kira, discovering that the bonding process had given her not just access to encrypted intelligence, but genuine insight into an entirely different way of understanding the universe. The bioarmor integration is stable, Dr. Chen reported, studying the readings from Alina's medical scanner with fascination. Your nervous system has adapted to the interface faster than our theoretical models predicted possible. It helps that the integration is voluntary, Alina replied, watching as Kira's armor displayed patterns that indicated contentment mixed with anticipation. When both parties are working toward the same goal, biological adaptation becomes much easier. Through their shared neural link, Alina felt Kira's amusement at the medical personnel's amazement over what Zephyrians considered a perfectly natural process. The bonding of consciousness across species barriers was challenging, but not unprecedented in Zephyrian culture. What was unprecedented was finding a human willing to undergo the process. The intelligence authentication has been confirmed by judicial authorities from 12 different species, announced Commander Torres, the medical station's security chief, who had replaced the previous team after their connection to the conspiracy became evident. The evidence you transmitted has resulted in arrest warrants for over 200 individuals across 43 worlds. And the war prevention? Kira asked, her bioarmor flickering with patterns that Alina now understood indicated professional satisfaction mixed with personal relief. All automated military response systems have been deactivated. The dead man protocol that would have triggered escalating conflicts has been officially cancelled by joint agreement of the affected governments. Alina felt a deep sense of completion that she realized was coming from both her own consciousness and Kira's shared emotional state. The conspiracy that had threatened to plunge the galaxy into profitable chaos had been exposed and neutralized, but more importantly, they had proven that cooperation between species could accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. What happens now? Dr. Chen asked, clearly fascinated by the implications of Alina's transformation. Do you remain here, or does your new diplomatic status require relocation? Actually, Alina said, sharing a moment of silent communication with Kira through their neural link, we have a proposal that might interest both the medical community and the diplomatic corps. She activated the holographic display system, which responded not just to her manual commands, but to direct neural interface with Kira's bioarmor. The resulting presentation combined human medical data with Zephyrian technological capabilities in ways that neither species could have achieved independently. We're proposing the establishment of the first interspecies medical diplomacy program, Alina announced as the display showed treatment protocols that integrated human therapeutic techniques with Zephyrian biotechnology, combining physical healing with diplomatic conflict resolution. The principle is simple, Kira added, her bioarmor patterns shifting to what looked like excitement about new possibilities. Many interstellar conflicts arise from misunderstandings about biological and cultural differences. Medical professionals who understand multiple species can serve as cultural bridges while providing healing services. You're talking about training human doctors to work with alien patients and vice versa, Commander Torres asked. We're talking about training medical diplomats who can heal both individuals and relationships between species, Alina corrected. Using the bonding process I underwent with Kira as a model for creating permanent interspecies medical teams. Dr. Chen leaned forward with obvious interest. How would this work in practice? Human medical knowledge combined with Zephyrian biotechnology creates treatment options that neither species could achieve alone. Alina explained, demonstrating by interfacing directly with the medical station's diagnostic systems through her neural link with Kira. But more importantly, the shared consciousness that results from the bonding process allows for communication that transcends language barriers and cultural misunderstandings. The refugee crisis that the conspiracy was exploiting could be addressed by medical teams that understand multiple species' biological and cultural needs, Kira added. No more allocation failures, because bureaucrats don't understand alien physiology or psychology. 6 months later, Alina stood in the main treatment center of the Interspecies Medical Diplomacy Institute, watching human and Zephyrian medical students working together to treat patients from a dozen different species. The facility was bustling with activity as the first graduates of their program prepared for deployment to conflict zones and refugee camps throughout the galaxy. The bonding success rate is higher than we predicted, Kira reported, joining Alina at the observation deck that overlooked the main treatment floor. 17 successful human Zephyrian medical teams, 8 human Catilian teams, and 5 Zephyrian Altarian teams. Any regrets about starting all this? Alina asked, though through their neural link she already knew the answer. About creating a program that's prevented 3 wars, treated over 1 million refugees, and established new protocols for interspecies cooperation. Kira's bioarmor flickered with patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. Not even close. Alina watched a human doctor and her Zephyrian partner working together to treat a patient whose species she didn't recognize. Their synchronized movements, suggesting the kind of seamless cooperation that only came from shared consciousness and mutual trust. "You know," she said, "when I gave you that first massage, I thought I was just treating nerve damage." "You were treating nerve damage," Kira replied, her bioarmor patterns shifting to what Alina had learned indicated affection mixed with amusement. "You just didn't realize that the damaged nerves belonged to an entire galaxy's worth of civilizations." Through their neural link, Alina felt Kira's contentment at seeing their accidental partnership evolve into something that was healing wounds across species barriers. The conspiracy that had tried to profit from interstellar conflict had been destroyed, but more importantly, they had created something positive from the ashes, a new model for cooperation that proved healing and diplomacy were fundamentally the same process. "What's our next project?" Alina asked, reviewing reports from teams deployed throughout the galaxy. "The Andromeda contact situation," Kira said, indicating a file that contained first contact protocols for an entirely new galaxy. "Apparently, they're requesting medical diplomats for the initial negotiations." "Road trip to another galaxy." "Road trip to another galaxy. Though this time, let's try to avoid accidentally preventing wars while giving massages." "Where's the fun in that?" Alina asked, and through their neural link, she felt Kira's agreement that some accidents were worth embracing, especially when they led to healing on a galactic scale. As they walked toward the spaceport where their ship waited, Alina reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by a single therapeutic touch. She had lost her old identity as a purely human medical professional, but gained something infinitely more valuable: the ability to heal not just bodies,